The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
I stood on the porch of my folks' place in Washington. The scent of soggy pine needles and funeral flowers was still all over my black clothes. I was clutching a heavy packet from my grandpa's attorney. It had the titles for 3 big farms and a mansion in San Francisco. I was about to head inside to share the news. But then I caught my mother's voice through the door. She wasn't upset. She was crunching numbers. "The doctor will be here tomorrow," my father whispered. With her military background, one post-traumatic stress report is all we need to get legal control of her. Then all those properties are ours. Have you ever felt like you were a ghost in your own family? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I didn't get hot with anger this time. I felt very cold and logical. After working as a tactical analyst for 6 years, I knew that the loudest person in the room is usually the one who is losing. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I just reached into my pocket, turned on my phone's recorder, and took a deep, steady breath. I had to be exactly what they were looking for. A broken soldier who was totally burned out by war and loss. I needed them to think their plan was working. I opened the door and let my shoulders drop. "I'm home," I said softly, making my voice sound thin. My mother rushed toward me with her arms open. It didn't feel like a hug, it felt more like a net coming down on me. "Oh, you look so pale, you must be wiped out," she said. Her voice was full of fake worry that I now saw as the smile of a predator. I let her take me to the couch. I sat where she told me. I drank the water she handed me. I played the role of a fragile doll that they planned to smash. Inside, my brain was already doing the math. For years, I had been the secret investor in their version of a family. I had sent back 75% of my checks from every trip overseas because I thought I was saving our history. For years, I poured my kindness into a glass they just kept dropping. I was done being their safety net. This wasn't a home. It was a jail without any bars. They thought my silence was a sign of weakness or a brain failing from the stress. They were already counting the things in my bag and whispering about them while I sat just 2 feet away. People often wonder why victims stay quiet or why they don't fight the second they find out they've been betrayed. They don't understand the invisible leash. When you grow up being told you're the problem or the difficult one, you learn how to wait. My silence wasn't a surrender. It was a surveillance job. I was checking the room, finding the exits, and figuring out where the enemy was weak. In special ops, we call it shaping the battlefield. You let the other guy think he's winning right until the moment you take the ground from under him. Everything was quiet for a few days, but their voices kept repeating in my head. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and old coffee, the scent of a house that had used me as its main source of money my whole life. For 6 years, I wasn't their daughter. I was just a big investment on their private books. I can still clearly recall the heat of the desert, the heavy weight of my gear, and the rhythmic sound of mortars far off. Every single time my military pay hit my bank account, I did a ritual of hurting myself. I sent 75% of it back to this house. I believed I was saving our family history. I thought I was the one guarding the 3 big farms my grandpa built with his own hands. My father used to call me on secure lines. His voice would sound fake and panicky. He would tell me that interest rates were going up, that people they owed money to were at the door, and that the family business was about to go under if one more payment was missed. I took those calls like they were official missions. I thought love was a contract, and I was proud to be the person who followed the rules. I can still feel the grit of sand in my teeth when I think about those months in the field. I would sit in the back of a transport truck, sweating through my uniform, and check my banking app just to be sure the transfer to my father had gone through. It gave me a reason to be there. I felt like I was the base holding the entire family together. I was the one getting shot at. But in my head, I was the one shielding them. But while I was eating sand and counting my food rations, my brother was making his life better. I look at him now, sitting in that chair with a phone that costs more than my first month of hazard pay. The light hits his shiny designer watch, a piece of jewelry that is equal to 3 months of my life in a war zone. He was bragging about his new truck earlier, a $65,000 machine that I basically bought for him with the money I thought was keeping the farm safe. My sister isn't any better. She is already looking at ticket prices to San Francisco, whispering to my mother about which fancy stores she wants to visit there. Once they get the mansion, they won't care about the sacrifice. They just see the math. My kindness had been a luxury. They had overdrawn on it for years. They looked at my time overseas and didn't see service. They saw a steady stream of cash. My family wasn't there to support me. It was a subscription service, and I was the only person paying the bill. The peeling paint on the porch wasn't because they were struggling for cash. It was a sign of their rotten morals. They had the money, my money, but they liked the quick fun of fancy vacations and expensive clothes more than taking care of the legacy they said they loved. I figured out today that I was not keeping a home safe. I was paying for a robbery. At exactly 10:00 sharp, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, clinical noise that meant their final attack was starting. My father opened the door with the fake sadness of a man at a funeral. He greeted a man named Dr. Bennett with a strong, businesslike handshake. Bennett didn't look like a doctor who heals people. He looked like a guy on a board for a mid-sized drug company. He had an expensive coat, shiny shoes, and eyes that had the kind of warmth you have to pay for. He smiled at me with a mean, narrow look that people usually give to little kids or hurt animals. "You must be Maya," he said quietly. He sat across from me and opened a leather folder. "Your family has been very worried about your transitions back into civilian life." I nodded slowly, letting my eyes wander to a spot on the wall behind him. I made my hands shake a little. It was just enough to be seen, but not enough to look like I was acting. I am tired," I whispered. My mother sat next to me, her hand feeling heavy and controlling on my shoulder. "Doctor, she's been so jumpy," she said. "She stays in the dark for hours. We are terrified she's going to hurt herself or make a mistake with the legacy Grandpa left." Dr. Bennett wrote something down in his file. "Confusion, disorientation, difficulty managing complex tasks," he muttered. "These are common symptoms of severe combat-related trauma. It might be wise to consider temporary measures. Support, oversight, someone to handle the heavy lifting while you heal." I looked up at him, making my eyes look glassy and unfocused. "Like guardianship?" I asked. The room went cold. My mother let out a light, nervous laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, honey, don't use such heavy words," she said. "We are just talking about a little help." But the help started right away. "Maya, honey," my mother said, reaching for my bag. "I'll take your phone. You don't need the distraction of notifications right now. And your father has the car keys. We don't want you driving in this state. It's for your own safety." I watched her hand close around my phone. I watched my father slide my keys into his pocket. They were taking away my connection to the world, one thing at a time, and they were doing it with smiles on their faces. This is how cruelty works when it's hidden. It doesn't always look like a punch or a scream. Often it looks like concern. It is the slow way they break down your boundaries until you think your own freedom is a problem. They had turned my service, my sacrifice, and my whole identity into a weapon against me. They had spent years telling themselves this was for my own good, but really it was just for their greed. They weren't protecting me. They were cashing me out. They were turning a daughter into a list of assets they could sell. I sat back and stopped acting weak. My posture wasn't just better, it was military grade. Dr. Bennett stopped writing in the middle of a sentence. My mother's hand on my shoulder flinched as I leaned away from her. The air in the room felt like it turned into a solid wall. My father frowned, and his hand went toward the car keys in his pocket. "Maya, honey, you're getting worked up again," he started, his voice a low, annoying hum. I didn't let him finish. "You were invited here under false pretenses," I said. My voice cut through the room like a cold blade. "There is no medical emergency. There is no consent, and there is absolutely no authority." I reached under a throw pillow and pulled out my iPad, the one I had been using under the blankets at 3:00 in the morning. I didn't wait for my father to yell or for my brother to make a joke. I tapped a link, and the screen filled with the sharp, professional face of Mr. Miller. My father's face showed total confusion that quickly turned into fear. "Mr. Miller," I said, keeping my eyes locked on my father, "are the assets secure?" The lawyer didn't smile. He looked like a man who liked it when a plan worked perfectly. "Airtight," Mr. Miller replied, his voice loud through the iPad speakers. "The 3 organic farms here in Washington and the San Francisco mansion have been officially locked into an irrevocable trust. You are the sole beneficiary. Your parents, your brother, and your sister have no legal right to touch, view, or even ask about those deeds. Any attempt to file for guardianship will be met with a legal block immediately." My mother let out a small, choking sound. "How could you? We were just trying to protect you." I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on my father, who was staring at the iPad like it was a live grenade. "This wasn't protection," I said. My voice was flat. "It was a hostile takeover. But you forgot one thing about tactical analysts. We look at the paper trail before we move. I didn't just lock up the farms. I audited my own life." Mr. Miller cleared his throat on the screen, and his face got serious. "Actually, there is another problem. During the deep check of your military savings, we found a bunch of weird withdrawals over the last 20 months. It looks like your father forged your signature to take out $485,000. Our records show the money was sent directly to pay off high-interest personal loans and gambling debts under your brother's name." The silence after that was heavy. My father's skin turned a sick gray color. My brother's foot stopped bouncing. The smug look on his face didn't just go away, it shattered. I rubbed my eyes, but I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for clarity. This wasn't a family meeting. It was a criminal discovery. My father hadn't just used up my kindness. He had stolen the literal price of my survival. $485,000 of hazard pay spent on my brother's bad bets. "That is a felony," I said, my voice as cold as a dial tone. "Forging the signature of a service member to steal federal money is a very serious crime. You weren't worried about my mental state. You were worried I would check the balance and see that you had emptied the vault." I leaned back. The couch didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like the command chair of a fort. I wasn't the daughter they had to manage. I was the person they owed money to, and they could never pay me back. This wasn't about revenge. This was accounting. And the interest was about to be too much for them to handle. The doorbell rang for the 3rd time that morning. It wasn't a doctor or another person trying to help them. It was the sound of the trap closing. My father tried to stand up, still clutching my car keys, but his legs didn't seem to work right. 2 police officers and a woman in a gray suit from Adult Protective Services walked into the living room. The house used to smell like lemon cleaner, but now it just smelled like the end of a long, coordinated lie. The woman from the agency didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She looked at the locked guest room door, my missing phone on the charger, and the way my mother was hovering over me like a guard. "Miss," she said, looking right at me, "we got your recordings and the paperwork from Mr. Miller. Are you being held here against your will?" I stood up, moving smoothly and on purpose. I held out my hand. My father looked at the officers, then at the floor, and slowly put my car keys into my palm. "I said, my voice steady, "but the tactical situation has changed." My mother fell into the armchair, her face turning red and ugly with tears that finally looked real. Not because she was sorry, but because she was terrified. "Maya, please," she cried out, reaching for my hand. "We are your parents. You can't do this to your own family. We were only thinking about the future." I looked at her, then at the fancy table and the crystal glasses. This was all just an act of power from people with an empty wallet. For years, they acted like the successful, elite family. But that status was a fake. They had rented that life using my hazard pay and my grandpa's silence. Without my money to fill the gap between their dreams and their reality, they weren't powerful. They were just a group of people who had used up their moral credit until they were broke in every way that mattered. "You aren't protecting a family," I said, looking at my father. "You are running a failing business, and I've decided to pull my investment." I put a single piece of paper on the table. It wasn't a doctor's form. It was a formal notice that I was taking the house. "Mr. Miller didn't just find your fake signature," I told him. "He found the second mortgage you secretly took out 20 months ago. Since you haven't paid the bank in 120 days, they were going to take the house. I didn't just save the farms. I used a company to buy the mortgage note from the bank directly. I'm not just your daughter anymore. I'm your lender." My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He was staring at the legal heading on the paper. "I own this house now," I said, my voice as cold as a winter mission. "You have exactly 10 days to sign this agreement to move out. If you do, I won't go after the $485,000 you stole, and I won't call the police about the fraud. If you are still here on the 11th day, the sheriff will kick you out, and I will give the evidence of your crime to the district attorney." My brother started to say something about his legal rights, but one look from the police officers shut him up. They had seen the bank statements. They had heard the tapes of them planning to lock me away. There was no way to get back to the good daughter they thought they could control. I walked toward the door, my boots making a loud noise on the hardwood floor I had paid to fix 3 years ago. I didn't look back at the begging or the excuses. I didn't need their permission to leave, because I had already taken the door with me. I moved into the mansion in San Francisco quietly. There was no big announcement and no social media posts to show it off. It was just the simple, heavy sound of a key turning in a lock that finally belonged only to me. That first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor with the windows wide open, listening to the city noises below. It felt like taking off a heavy backpack I hadn't realized I was carrying for 6 years of war and a lifetime of family pressure. The weight was gone, replaced by a strange mix of being alone and feeling totally relieved. I didn't sell the 3 farms in Washington. Instead, I turned them into something my grandpa would have actually liked. I started the foundation, a special place for veterans dealing with families who steal their money. We give accounting and legal help to those whose families thought their service was a blank check. Grandpa was right. These places weren't just trophies. They were responsibilities. I hired managers who cared about being honest and paying fair wages instead of the quick money my parents wanted. The money now flows in steadily, but it helps build lives instead of paying for my brother's gambling or my sister's fancy trips. This was the best kind of justice, not just taking the house, but building something that actually meant something. Real revenge isn't about how much you can burn down. It's about how much you can grow after people betray you. While my father and mother were busy trying to act like a family for people who finally saw the truth, I was busy building a safe place for people no one sees. I realized then that I wasn't a daughter to be managed anymore. I was a woman who decided what she was worth. I gave them back their lessons about fake love, wrapped in a house notice, and I moved into a future they couldn't touch. A few months later, I went back to that hill in Washington. I stood under the old oak tree, watching the sun go down. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt full. I took a deep breath of mountain air and realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to sign a paper or give me permission to exist. "Grandpa, I did okay," I whispered. "I didn't just protect the money. I protected the person you saw when no one else was looking." Maya's experience shows that being quiet doesn't mean you are weak. It is a way to plan and get real justice. Please remember to like this and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story about someone getting their real life back.